Welcome back to another episode. This one's going to be quite abbreviated because we've all got lots of stuff on our desks, but we wanted to elaborate on an idea that came up last week, which was potentially some ideas for listeners or people that are looking to start a business, or at least potentially hang a shingle on the side for now, while they work away at their current day job. But I thought we'd go around with I guess a few high level concepts where we think the economy's headed. And again, if we were to start up something from scratch, what interests us, what we think, would be kind of fun to do, and any other ideas or recommendations for the listeners out there. So one common theme for me, I'll go first in terms of, some of the sort of guidance that I would look at is, anything to do with an aging population. I think we've talked about it at length on the pod already about the changing demographics, but anything related to, I think there's a lot of opportunity in, services related to aging. That could be, something related to healthcare. It could be something related to education. I know my extended family, we were holidaying with them recently, and we were in the States with them. And there was a local guy that was doing technology installation. So kind of like if people are familiar with the Best Buy Geek Squad, where it's kind of like the installation service systems integrator when you buy a TV or whatever. This guy had essentially like a little truck side project where he would help these mostly retirement community, golf course developments and stuff like that, hook up routers and TVs and stuff like that. And I said, well, how is business, considering it's probably looked like it was pretty busy? And he's like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and it'd be a fun little idea for somebody younger that knows their way around technology. And there's going to be a lot more people trying to figure out how to hook up TVs and stuff like that as populations get older. And especially as we get more complicated tools, AI, we'll obviously talk about that. But any other ideas from you guys, what you think would be kind of cool to do if you were to start over?
Yeah, you want me to chime in here, Andrew?
Yeah, go
I got to
ahead.
say something that resonates with both of us. How yesterday's necessary evil becomes today's intolerable burden. So that's yesterday's necessary evil becomes today's intolerable burden. So we heard that at a conference we went to, and it really resonated with me. I've been thinking about it every day since then, and how things are evolving so quickly. Tech is moving so quickly with AI, and we're becoming so accustomed to having things done so rapidly for us, so much more efficiently. And if you think back, the example that I like to use is the Blockbuster and Netflix. How that was how things were back then. You'd go into the movie store, you'd rent a movie, you'd hope it was in there. You didn't know if it was going to be in there. You'd have to rewind it at times because the person before didn't rewind it. And then you'd have a couple days with it to return it back. And that was the way things were. But with technology and what Netflix brought to the table, the streaming service, it just made that like an intolerable burden. Imagine doing that today. The same with taking a taxi. I was just in New York last week, and luckily New York has an abundance of taxis, but it's still a lot of work. Even though that was yesterday's necessary evil, but today it's today's intolerable burden. Having to hail down taxis, not knowing when one's going to turn the corner. We're so spoiled now with going on our phones and just locking in an Uber and knowing exactly when it's going to arrive and who your driver is. So I think that's a good foundation for this discussion, for entrepreneurs to think about what is something that people are doing today that I could fast forward, think ahead, think 5 years ahead, think 10 years ahead. Is this going to be the way it's being done tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And is there a more efficient way or a more convenient way of doing this? And if there is, maybe you can get on the forefront of that, and you could be the one that's jumping ahead of the curve. And now you're creating a business out of something that is nothing really today. So I'm going to start right there.
Awesome.
Now, to give some tangible examples, depends. You gave one, Kyle, in healthcare, and I guess the aging demographic, there's definitely going to be some things that there's some opportunities there. There's some opportunity, and any business, I guess it all depends where your passion is. I think you got to find where your passion is, find where you have some kind of knowledge about the product or about a consumer or about a service, and then just think about what that's going to look like, that service sector or a nuance of that service sector is going to look like in 5 years time. That's what I would do. That's where I would start. Can I give some examples off the top of my head? It'd be very specific if I did.
Interesting. No, yeah, I guess it's my turn. Um, yeah, so I know there's a lot of talks about AI. Like we've all talked about AI, and I'm sure we hear about AI all day. I think I haven't got. I don't think there's a conversation I've had with anybody that didn't touch AI. Like
I know
everything
where
I
you're going with
talk
this,
about
Andrew.
is with AI. So I'm gonna go with something different. Okay. Yes, I know. Like you know where you guys know where I stand with AI, and I think it's going to dominate the world and all that stuff. But I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to say that right now because I think the opportunity is pretty apparent there. I'm going to take the approach of talking about something different. I think there's a lot of areas of improvements that we can make in society, and I want to talk more about the traditional finance space because I think there's tons of opportunity to optimize traditional finance that essentially that's not being discussed right now. Um, I'll give you one example. Traditional markets are open from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Um, I question I question that as why is it only open for this period of time? Why are we still going through the traditional method of buying and selling stock on the floor at the stock exchange, right? Like it's just everything should be computerized. And recently, BlackRock mentioned something very interesting. It's called tokenization of real world assets. I think there's a massive opportunity there for startups to look into how to tokenize real world assets and put them onto a blockchain, similar to how Bitcoins is operating right now, and that's going to improve transparency, speed, and essentially it can operate 24/7, right, through smart contracts or within the blockchain, and it really maintains the integrity of these transactions. So I think there's massive opportunity there that are not being discussed, and that's essentially where I would probably be digging into is looking into various blockchains, looking into how to build smart contracts, and how this movement of building things on the blockchain impacts us as a consumer. Like how can we transact much faster? I'll give you an example they talk about is putting shares onto the blockchain, putting house deeds onto blockchain. That I think is a very powerful thing that can occur. And with the rise of AI, this along with AI can make a very can make it very transformational. So
Wow, you
that's
went somewhere I did
that's
not
the
expect you to
opportunity that
go.
I'm seeing.
I thought you were going to go robotics, but yeah, you went somewhere where no man has dared venture.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say
Andrew,
there's a lot of companies that are trying to do that, but I think the one thing that they're all running into is that it's really the split between the real world and we'll call it the blockchain world are very, very distinct, right? Like we've talked already on the pod about stable coins and the usage in terms of foreign exchange, where people are essentially trading whatever their domestic currency is for a stable coin, transacting in the stable coin, or sorry, transacting in the stable coin and then taking the stable coin and converting it to their local currency. And they're avoiding huge currency transaction fees. The networks are far faster and easier to use. But I think that's probably the closest I've seen or heard of the real world. We'll call it the legacy systems, in terms of utilizing a blockchain technology, like what you were talking about in terms of buying and selling stock. Like there are people like exchanges that try and do that. Like, would you hypothetically, if that existed, if there was an exchange, let's say for commercial real estate, like, real estate investment trusts are big pretty much anywhere. Would you, and obviously it was open for after hours trading. Like you can technically buy stock with brokers and stuff like that after hours, but I get your point that it's not open all the time. If we had a 24-hour exchange for whatever type of asset and it was purely reliant on a blockchain, would you buy a bunch of coins and would you transact in that marketplace?
Of course, 100%. Like I think it's no different than owning and buying and selling shares. Right now, it's actually a lot more administrative work that happens behind the scenes that are essentially these exchanges are using people in the background to kind of give us that impression that things are being transacted and done right away, right? Like when you sell shares of a company, it doesn't get settled right away. It appears like it's settled, but it's not settled for at least a couple of days. So that to me is extremely slow in comparison to something that's settled immediately on the blockchain. Like we're talking about instant, right? And that also gives us the security that something has been transacted correctly as well, because everything is very transparent on a blockchain. So that's, I would say if that is available, I would 100% utilize it, because we as consumer wouldn't feel the difference at all. But on the back end, it's all automated. But right now, it's just giving us the impression that it's automated and digital, but it's not. Like Swift.
Wow.
Swift is a perfect example. When you make a transaction right now, I don't know if you guys ever done that, but when you transfer money from one part of the world to another part of the world, it's extremely painful. Extremely painful. And I question why we're still doing this. It's like we've gone from mail to emails, but now money for some reason is still stuck in the Stone Ages.
Yeah. So I've got a pain point in the similar vein that I've thought about in the terms of blockchain before, and that is registry agents. And I know in the US, like you could look at it from like a DMV or whatever, but in Canada, we typically have, I don't know about you guys in Ontario, in Alberta, we have provincially licensed or sanctioned registry agents. And they do a bunch of different services, but primarily they're, you go there to register a new vehicle or get a new ID or, file your annual report. My big bone to pick is there is absolutely zero automation. Like these are, I wouldn't be surprised if these are running DOS and they're like, they rekey every single piece of paper. You go in there with a bunch of documents that you filled out and they sit there in front of you and they retype every single letter that you've put on that form.
Same here in Ontario. Yeah.
To me, like, I understand, again, we've talked about the argument of like, well, we want to create jobs, we want to employ people, but like that is just an absolute massive waste of time and money. And you wouldn't need a blockchain. You wouldn't need a distributed ledger. You could run, a provincial network, a provincial server, with a bunch of nodes everywhere if you wanted to make sure that it had some security baked in. And you could automate every single function of that. You could have, registry of all the IDs, ledger of all the IDs, all the companies, all of their financials, all of their annual reports. And more importantly, you could just do that from home. Like, we jumped decades ahead a couple of years ago when we scrapped the license plate stickers and everyone was like, how is this safe? How is this possible? The world is going to come to an end because I can't tell whether or not someone has a updated registry sticker on their plate. But
True.
So archaic, it's crazy.
Yeah, even driving records too. Think of we deal with letters of experience and insurance. Letters of experience is like basically it's a letter, a manual letter we have to get from an insurance company. So an insured has to go to their insurance company to get this letter saying that they were a driver on this policy and these were the claims in that policy. And it's like so archaic, so difficult to get. They're waiting on a person to manually create that. That should be all in a database. We already have Auto Plus reports. Auto Plus reports have kind of people's driving history in terms of infractions, accidents. I think it has their insurance history too, but I don't know why it's not all tying into a central database where an insurer can, with permission of the client, pull this out. Yeah, smart contract, like Andrew said, the blockchain.
You're giving away ideas here.
What's really fascinating about Auto Plus is that's a proprietary product. So people pay to pull reports from that, and the companies that they also are reliant on the customer to populate that data, right? So it's like a Carfax, where like the dealerships will report odometer readings to Carfax, and then the users pay Carfax to pull those reports.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a necessary evil that's going to become.
Yeah.
It's already an intolerable burden today. It's
Yeah,
it's not even a future intolerable burden. It's an intolerable burden today. That needs to be freaking disrupted.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like, here's a very interesting idea that I've always had for years. Is I think the blockchain and AI, there's going to be like an intersection where I think AI will need blockchain, and as humans we will need blockchain. And if you can think of why, the identity between the separation between people and AI is getting blurred, right? It's getting really, really difficult to know what's real and what's not real on the internet.
Sometimes I question if Andrew's real.
Yeah, like, I don't know, maybe I am AI, Mike, but like, so the separation is getting blurred, and the issue is that we cannot realistically differentiate this, and it's going to get harder and harder. Our identity right now belongs to the big tech firms. Like, your identity is tied to Google, it's email, Meta's Facebook, like Amazon. These companies owns your digital identity, which is, in my opinion, very scary.
Are you taking a dystopian view, Andrew, on that?
If you ever lose your identity here, your email, you're like nobody on the internet. It's crazy. So I think that there's the biggest opportunity for blockchain and AI is in identity. Basically, blockchain there should be a way to manage identity, sovereign identity on the blockchain. So like Mike, like you're saying, like, you should be able to know who you are, and this identity should tie into your driving record, for example. Like, all of these things that ties into you as an individual does not belong to you anymore. All these data that actually belongs to you doesn't actually belong to you. It belongs to AutoPlus. It belongs to Facebook, So I think there's a massive opportunity here, but it's obviously, it's not something easy to tackle, right? It's a big problem.
It's going to create a lot of fear with people that are worried about this conspiracy and government controlled identity and this and that. And I know you're saying decentralize it, but yeah, it's a little scary. Let's go on the flip side.
Yeah,
let's go on the flip side. How about like construction, guys? Like, where's construction going to be in 5 years? Is that going to be replaced? AI is not going to do construction. I know Andrew thinks robots are going to do it, but how soon? Like, when is a robot going to be able to go in and wire a house or brick a house or put a roof on a house?
I have money on it, Mike. Less than 5 years.
Wow, that's super aggressive.
I'd say less than 20. So what tasks are we talking about? We're talking about roofing a house. A robot is
like construction. Like, your kids. Are you telling do we tell our children to learn? I keep telling them to learn software, start interacting with AI, whatnot. However, should we be telling them to get into the trades, because that's something that's going to be isolated for the next 10, 15 years? Maybe it's not. I don't know.
So one application where I think we're probably less than 5 years out is, and just to preface this, I have a very, like you guys, I have a very bullish outlook on robotics, especially with AI, because I think what we're seeing coming out of the robotics field after the evolution of these AI models, these large language models, is really astonishing. Where one example was a humanoid robot where every single joint is essentially a separate motor. And previously, they had to hard code algorithms so that it would calculate what each joint is doing for a specific action, like jumping or standing or whatever. And one of the examples I read up about was they essentially created a system where each joint is able to communicate. Each joint is a node, and it's able to communicate amongst itself, and it's plugged into essentially its own little onboard large language model. And what they enabled by this is essentially learning. As they said, okay, well, I can do this and you can do this, and this is the output that we see, or this is the sensory input that we receive from the sensor array. And as a result, you could really say, like, we want you to stand. And through trial and error, this large, this model is essentially able to control this assortment of motors in a way to create its own built for usage, purpose built sort of algorithm. And so I definitely think that robotics is going to be probably the biggest step change as a result of AI. The generative stuff is also very impressive, but I think we're going to be accomplishing stuff with robotics that we otherwise, same thing with self-driving, stuff like that, which we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do at all. And so I see the biggest application in the near term to be like labor jobs. So I know for like construction sites, a lot of guys would start, let's say, doing framing, and you're moving lumber, you're cutting, you're measuring and you're cutting. These are fairly simple tasks, and there's a lot of rote repetition where you do you cut again like 100 pieces of 2x4 in the same way or the same size, depending on what the job is. So I think it would be really real straightforward. I'm not going to say easy because it wouldn't be easy, but I think it would be straightforward to apply the robotics type of methodology and learning to those sorts of work sites, where you would have a crew that would be, again, there'd be maybe one robot, and they'd all be installing it.
But your general labor, but you're saying more of like the skilled labor still further out, right?
I definitely think so. Like, especially stuff like roofing, where, depending on if you're looking at speed and accuracy and stuff like that, like, I guess you could get to a point where, if you're able to sort of load the robot, like it would be some sort of a mechanized, moving shingles around, and it's nailing them with a nail gun or whatever. Like, I think you could augment the human element quite well. I don't know that it would add a whole bunch of value. I think the biggest value would be really like we're seeing in the white collar space. It's software that's essentially automating, really mundane, repetitive, dull tasks that you don't need any reasoning or knowledge capabilities for, and that frankly people don't really want to do. Like, a lot of people in construction get hurt moving stuff, or they get crushed because something hasn't been tied down or whatever. Like oil and gas, there's massive issues with that kind of stuff, because there's you're dealing with huge pipes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess anything with dangerous jobs or whatever, I think those were essentially disappeared and be replaced by these humanoids. And the reason why I'm so bullish on why I say 5 years is because of Moore's laws, right? And if you're familiar with Moore's law, it's essentially technology doubles every 2 years, right? And right now we do have a hardware limitation because of the demand for GPU, and the requirement, the hardware requirement is not there yet. But I think eventually that's gonna, it's always the case, right? Like you see hardware hits a cap eventually, just like the cell phone, and then software catches up, and then software becomes extremely advanced. But I think now it cycles back to hardware again. Isn't it interesting how hardware is now in serious demand? Because the demand, what's driving it is the AI demand is driving all this. Eventually, the hardware is going to outpace that, and it's going to be extremely advanced because we can double the amount of transistors on these chips every 2 years, and it's essentially going to provide enough computing power for these AI and robots to operate. And this is a matter of software and learning at that point. So I think the pace of innovation is going to move a lot faster over the next couple of years. First of all, because there's tons of money being poured into building better semiconductors, and there's tons of money in essentially getting these models to become more efficient. So software is evolving just as fast. So if these two things are evolving extremely fast, you're going to expect doubling, if not quadruple or whatever, the pace of innovation the past few years that we've had with AI. You can see like the last couple of years how much AI has advanced, and there's still a lot of room for it to advance. So
it's been nonlinear.
I don't think we're that far away, and I would probably say that we're going to see it very, very soon.
So if we think robotics is the next big thing, well, we talked about blockchain, we talked about robotics. Listen, the sure bet is labor. For the short term is labor, because that's something that AI and the blockchain can't disrupt yet. But if we think robotics and machines are the next big thing, how about jobs around that? How about like engineers that specialize in creating these machines or servicing these machines?
I think it's going to be machine servicing machines. I don't know why there would be humans, engineers servicing machines. If anything, It's very interesting. I don't know if you heard about the Unitree H1 malfunction in China. Essentially, people thought it went rogue and started attacking people and waving its arm around, but it turns out that it was a malfunction in its balancing algorithm. So and it looks like it was trying to balance and it was just waving its arm around. People thought they were trying to attack them, but it wasn't the case. So this is where I'm getting at is that AI is going to replicate a lot faster. It's going to be a machine producing machines in the future. It's not going to be humans producing machines anymore. And at some point, we need to have AI, essentially white hat AI, that are capable of diagnosing these AI, because it can be, some of these problems can be so detailed, and I think it's going to surpass human understanding of how to fix them. You can't debug an AI. It's going to,
Yeah, but that's way out. Like
have a pretty difficult time, and I think we're approaching that right now, which is
for the immediate term though, Andrew, you're going to need human supervision, and that's going to require human jobs that basically are able to train these machines and not just train the AI, but kind of like oversee even these facilities that are going to have to spring up. Like manufacturing is going to have to ramp up if we're going to start going big on machinery.
It's Tesla is already doing it. Like they're trying to get these robots, these humanoids, to operate these factories. That's the plan. Yeah, so we have to actually
maybe factory building then.
Really fast.
Maybe factory building. There's a good job. If you could be the ones that build the factories, or you think the robots are going to build the factories too. But the robots have to be built before the factories are built.
They're going to build their own factories, Mike.
It's an interesting point because
Mike, you're robots first.
You're looking at like the next generation. You're looking at like 20 years out by like, you know, what young people today should be focusing on. I think that's valid, but I think, you know, in terms of what people should be focusing on today, I definitely agree with the build out, the warehouse build out. Like we've talked about Kevin O'Leary's like Wonder Valley project, which is again just essentially a cluster GPU compute cluster, and the requirement for data centers in today's AI era. I think in the next, before our kids' generation grows up, I think there's going to be a massive demand for, you know, mechanized manufacturing facilities. And I think, you know, we're seeing that in the Trump administration priorities right now, trying to onshore as much high technology manufacturing as possible. So if today you had the ability and the chops and the interest to be able to try and go down that path, there's no question in my mind, like there would be a ton of industries, ton of customers that would be able to take advantage of even, you know, semi-automated robotics. Like even if it's stationary, you know, the classic sort of like pivoting arm and spray, you know, paint nozzles and stuff like that. Like I think there's still a ton of demand for that. And let's be honest, those companies that do that are incredibly profitable. They do a very good job of that. So,
and
that's what I would get into.
I guess, you know, like, because I get this question quite often, and I think the next generation, like our kids and things like that, they need to essentially take on jobs that where human flaws becomes interesting. Think of it like that. Human flaws becomes interesting. Those are the jobs where I think it's still going to be around. Like you don't want to watch perfect sports. It's boring. You know, you don't want to watch a perfect debate. It's boring. You know, like things like that. You don't want to watch reality TV and see perfect people, you know, like bickering with each other. These are human flaws that I think will always kind of be interesting for entertainment. I think those will still be around, but anything that requires perfection will be taken over by robots or AI. I'll just leave it at that.
I'd actually disagree on the AI piece, because I think one of the current debates, which I find really interesting, is the argument between deterministic and probabilistic. So like what I mean by deterministic is essentially the way humans do things. We were talking about earlier, like a repetitive task. So if you phone your banker and you say, hey, I need you to, you know, open an account, you're pretty sure that they're going to open up the account the same way every single time that they receive that instruction. Whereas AI, depending on the model and depending on the prompt, they'll actually do different things. And there's all sorts of outlier, you know, cases of hallucination where they'll do something totally different. And so there is a certain element that the AI is not is not deterministic. It's not running the same algorithm over and over again. It's probabilistic. So it's taking a bunch of inputs, it's kind of weighing them, and it's saying what's the most likely orientation or assortment or whatever of this output. And so I think there is a very valid concern that for tasks that should be deterministic, AI, especially the way that we're experimenting with right now, is not going to be the right output, because it's just going to be too creative. It's going to be too unpredictable. It's too probabilistic. And so I do think that there's an opportunity there in that space itself to try and create sort of a quasi, you wouldn't want to call it AI, but like some sort of a quasi model, similarly to what I was describing about the public sector, automating basic, public sector processes. You wouldn't need an AI to do that. You wouldn't need a large language model to do that. You would simply need a well-trained, well-orchestrated, sequence of algorithms to be able to execute on those sorts of functions. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes of it. Michael, what are you thinking? What's your recommendations to your kids other than coding and learning how the systems work? What do you think umbrella industries are going to be in high demand?
I still think if they came to me and they wanted to get into skilled trade, I probably would. I wouldn't push back on that. I think that's a good business to get in. Especially look at you got to realize, you got to think about when the kids are coming into the workforce. If they're coming to the workforce, like we talked about, in the next 5 to 10 years, mine might be a little further out than that. So I have to think about that question closely. But if they were coming into the workforce in 5 to 10 years, there's so much expenditure that's going to be happening with infrastructure, with manufacturing, with processing, potentially resources. So I think some kind of construction or some kind of engineering around creating tangible products. If you can work on those facilities, like we talked about, if you can work on infrastructure, these tunnels, these bridges we're building, that's going to require people for the next 5 to 10 years, in my opinion. And Andrew, like the humanoids will probably come into prominence much later on. They'll be introduced maybe within 5 years, but I agree with Kyle where it'll just be like an augmented sort of thing. Well, they'll come in experimental. Maybe they'll start with the low-hanging fruit, the most dangerous jobs, or the jobs that can just be, very simple. But eventually, yeah, they'll move up the skill ladder, but it'll take a long time for them to get to the point where they can replace a human.
Don't forget Moore's Law, Mike.
I don't know. I think it's a long way out.
Today, I'm going to say today is May 15th. We will open up this video again in 5 years. So let's see, 2030.
Okay, so my guess by 2030, I'll say that 10% of the workforce in construction or in fabrication will be robotic. 10%.
10%. That's it. Okay.
That's it. 15 max. Well, let's see.
I would probably go as high as 50%, if anything.
Wow.
Or if not higher. So minimum.
Just to clarify, you're saying that in 5 years, Andrew, 50% of the construction workforce will be mechanized automation.
Yes. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, that's really bullish.
That's crazy.
Yes.
We better start buying some stocks and some robotics companies if that's the case.
If Tesla is planning to send these robots within the next couple of years to Mars to start building civilization there with these robots, they better be able to do these labor jobs on Earth by 2030.
Yeah, but you said the limitation as well is manufacturing them. The facilities aren't there to build them in masses.
So. That's what I'm saying. Like robots will manufacture robots. So I'm thinking Tesla factory is going to be filled with these robots that are manufacturing these robots 24/7. So I think there should be no limitation at that point. So it's going to be exponential.
I hope you're wrong, Andrew.
Basically, the production
our
of
kids are screwed.
Is going to be exponential. Okay.
Man, I'm going to have to rethink what my kids are going to do if you're right.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Well, I know, Andrew, you got to run. You got to get your back looked at because we're still not humanoids ourselves. So we'll put a pin in that for now. And we'll come back at least in 5 years. We'll probably talk about this topic again, but we'll leave it there for now. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to chatting with you guys on the next one.